there seems to be a little bit of a trend with the Russian military right now. Russia sends one of its small units to take a Ukrainian settlement. That unit succeeds, and Russia declares victory. Flags are raised and smiles are all around, as Russia believes it's occupied another scrap of Ukraine's territory. Then, Ukraine strikes back, and Russia loses in hours what it may have taken days or even weeks to gain. And it's happened all over again. Russia declared victory in Verbove. Ukraine flipped that victory into a crushing defeat by striking back instantly and without mercy. The story begins with Russia's claimed victory. On October 1st, AA reported that Russia's defense ministry had made the interesting claim that it captured the village of Verbove, not the well-known frontline settlement in Zaporizhzhia, but a smaller one in the Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, which borders the Zaporizhzhia Oblast and sits just north of the administrative border between Dnipropetrovsk and the Donetsk region. That alone would make the village a pretty major capture for Russia. Any step taken closer to that border is great for Russia, as reaching that border could allow it to partially encircle Ukraine's defenders in the Donetsk Oblast. The Kyiv Independent followed up on AA's report, adding that the capture would be part of a Russian push into the Dnipropetrovsk that had taken place during the summer. That push included attacks near Kyiv and Verbove in late September, preceding Russia's October 1st claim about Verbove. Previously unoccupied and of little strategic significance outside of its proximity to Zaporizhzhia and Donetsk, the region seems to become a target for Vladimir Putin because his troops, frankly, are failing to take the ground that Russia's leader expected them to take in 2025. It's pretty simple logic on Russia's part. If Russia can't take the territory it actively wants, it takes territory that doesn't matter as much. If nothing else, it stretches the front lines and gives Ukraine another problem to think about. All in all, this represents a net win for Russia. It captures another settlement and is able to proclaim a small victory against Ukraine. Only, all is not as it seems with Russia's Verbove capture. That became immediately apparent after Russia's defense ministry claimed the capture, as Ukraine immediately shot back that Russia hadn't taken Verbove at all, per the Kyiv Independent. Only a couple of days later, it was revealed that Russia had managed to get its troops into Verbove. However, they hadn't captured anything. They were there one second and gone the next, as a devastating Ukrainian strike decimated them where they stood, leaving Verbove clearly still in Ukraine's hands. At least, that's according to the Kyiv Post, which published a report on October 3rd claiming that Russia's supposed Verbove takeover had only lasted for a handful of minutes before Ukraine's armed forces took them out. The Russian assault that would supposedly have secured Verbove wasn't an assault at all. It was a tiny team of infiltrators that had essentially managed to sneak into the settlement, where they tried to plant a flag before they were caught. Russia may have managed to gain some mileage out of that infiltration, publishing a propaganda video showcasing the supposed capture of the video, the Kyiv Post reports. However, what really happened was very different, Ukraine claims, and Ukraine says it has the proof. In a Telegram post covering what really happened in Verbove, Ukraine's 110th Separate Mechanized Brigade was more than happy to share the real details. Recently, the enemy made a statement and showed a propaganda video allegedly about the capture of the village of Verbove, which is located in the area of responsibility of the 110th Separate Mechanized Brigade. The Telegram post begins, setting the tone for what's to come nicely. Russia claimed it failed to prove. That information is not true. The enemy's DRG penetrated the village of Verbove to make a video of the flag-raising ceremony, after which the occupiers were destroyed by our units, the 110th Motorized Rifle Brigade said. The brigade then followed this up with a statement that its soldiers entered the village to take out the remnants of the Russian infiltrators, securing Verbove again. We call on Ukrainians to trust only official sources of information authorized to comment on the situation on the front, the post concluded, which is an important message for all Ukrainians to hear. Don't believe Russia's lies, the 110th Motorized Rifle Brigade seems to be saying. Seldom is what Russia says and what Russia does one and the same thing. Of course, this all sounds like one word against another. Russia claims to have captured Verbove, while Ukraine says that the supposed capture was just a bunch of infiltrators trying to get a photograph for propaganda purposes before they were destroyed. Who's telling the truth? one could easily believe either claim, so there has to be hard evidence one way or the other. There is. The 110th Motorized Rifle Brigade's Telegram post didn't just include a statement, it also contained a video showing what really happened to the Russian occupiers in Verbove. The video shows a tiny contingent of Russian soldiers attempting to hoist their country's flag up. In a heartbeat, those soldiers, with Russia's flag still in their hands, are obliterated by a Ukrainian strike that comes out of nowhere. The video then switches to a slightly more urbanized location, presumably also in Verbove, where another small group of Russian soldiers is trying to pull the same trick. This time, they're hoisting the flag up among the shelled remains of some buildings. The footage doesn't clearly show what happens next. It appears that Ukraine's ground forces attacked, seemingly with the help of drones, forcing the Russian infiltrators to take cover. It's clear what happens to one of the Russian soldiers, however. Hiding within the remnants of a building, he appears to poke his head out to see if the coast is clear. Before that soldier can make a move, there's another explosion. Another Russian occupier down, another failed flag raising. The video concludes with what really happened in Verbove. With Russia's flag-bearing soldiers downed, Ukraine's troops hold up their flag for a watching reconnaissance drone to record. The drone then zooms out to show as much of the village as possible. There isn't a trace of another Russian soldier, much less a full unit anywhere. Verbove was never fully captured. Russian troops got inside, and they were taken out long before Russia could claim or fortify the village. The video claims that 3 soldiers were taken out, though admittedly this footage isn't perfect. There are no timestamps provided. Plus, anybody who isn't from Verbove could argue that this footage could have been shot anywhere else in Ukraine. The Kyiv Post also notes that some clarification is needed on the footage before it can be confirmed as coming from the village. The Ukrainian open source project Deep State has Verbove labeled as a territory requiring clarification. Ukraine's 110th Brigade has criticized that labeling, stating that Deep State is perhaps amplifying Russia's disinformation operation with such reports. But what is wholly undeniable is that the video shows 2 instances of small Russian units attempting to raise their flag before they're quickly annihilated, just like Ukraine claimed. With Russia seemingly pushed out of Verbove almost as soon as its forces infiltrated, the question now is why Russia even wanted to capture the village in the first place. One reason has already been touched upon, which is that it wanted footage for propaganda purposes. Spreading disinformation, especially if that disinformation helps to fool its own people, is one of the Kremlin's most common moves. This is evident in every aspect of Russian society, according to the Government of Canada's website. The Kremlin controls all official communication in Russia, as is to be expected of most nations. But where other countries might use such channels to communicate the truth to their citizens, the Kremlin uses them to develop and spread erroneous or manipulated content through its official government communications, such as news releases, speeches, and social media posts. It's all about creating a narrative rather than telling citizens what's really happening. Verbove is the perfect example of that. It seems far more likely than not that Ukraine is telling the truth about what happened in Verbove. However, many in Russia will never see that. Reporters Without Borders notes that nearly 2/3 of Russians get the vast majority of their news from television, which is controlled by the Russian state. Many have internet connections, but this reliance on television suggests that the majority of Russia's civilians won't look beyond what the Kremlin tells them to find the truth behind their state's words. Even those who get a little more adventurous with their internet connections may find they can't find the information that will show them what's really going on. As Human Rights Watch reported in July, the Russian state has blocked thousands of websites that could reveal the truth. Human rights organizations and independent media outlets are the main targets. However, social media platforms often find themselves being banned by Russia, as do the web pages of politicians who oppose Putin. The only way to get around these types of restrictions is to use a virtual private network, or VPN, Human Rights Watch says. But there's another problem. Many Russians have no idea how to use a VPN. Plus, as with the internet itself, Russia is working hard to block these tools because it knows they could provide a pathway to the truth. Think about all of this in the context of what both sides say happened in Verbove. Ukraine offered a video showing Russia's soldiers attempting to raise their flag before they were taken out. While that video isn't perfect, Ukraine also doesn't shy away from admitting that Russian infiltrators, though few in number, managed to make it into Verbove. Russia, on the other hand, would show nothing but the flag raising. With access to other sources of information either blocked or routinely ignored by a majority portion of the Russian population that only watches official broadcasts, that is all that most average Russians will see. The flag is raised, Russia won. That's the message that Putin wants to spread, and it's what Verbove was really all about for Russia. And if there's any doubt about that, Russia has made it a bit of a trend to claim victories in territories that it only manages to hold for days, or in some cases, a handful of weeks. The Verbove takedown may be the quickest that Ukraine has managed, but it's far from the only example of a quick reclamation of territory. On September 19, for instance, UAY reported that Ukraine had managed to retake 7 settlements in the Donetsk region in a series of counterattacks. That amounts to about 60 square miles liberated. A further 66 square miles has been inspected and cleared of Russian troops, UAY adds. This was all territory that Russia had managed to gain during its summer push towards Pokrovsk. Putin made capturing that vital city one of the main goals of Russia's summer offensive. Pokrovsk is still in Ukraine's hands. Russia failed, and it's now losing the territory it did manage to gain within weeks of taking it in the first place. Russia, of course, won't report on any of this. It'll just share the flag-raising pictures in these lost territories and act like everything is going as it should in Ukraine. Fakery is just part of the Russia media makeup. The Institute for the Study of War, or ISW, highlighted that in its September 25 Russian offensive campaign assessment. According to the ISW, Russia has overestimated its territorial gains for 2025 quite dramatically in several regions. Kyiv is the most affected, with Russia having inflated its advances by 112%. The ISW also reports a 33% inflation in Donetsk, a 5% inflation in Zaporizhzhia, and an 83% inflation in the Dnipropetrovsk region, which is where Verbove is located. Across the board, Russia is claiming advances that it hasn't made. Verbove is just the latest example. In reality, the Kyiv Independent reported on October 1st the pace of Russian advances in September slowed dramatically compared to August. Deep State recorded a 44% month-to-month decline, meaning Russia captured just 0.04% of Ukraine in September. That's the sort of information that the Kremlin doesn't share with its people. If they knew how slow and grinding the actual advance was, rather than the fake advance the Kremlin convinces them is happening, the Russian people might have a reason to rise up against Putin. Propaganda has a purpose for Russia's leader, and Verbove just happens to be the latest place Russia claims it's captured. But assume that Verbove wasn't all about the flag raising for Russia. Perhaps there was a strategic goal beyond the propaganda. Verbove could also offer a route deeper into Dnipropetrovsk, though that's a region that Russia has placed little importance on since the Ukraine war devolved into the attritional quagmire that it is today. Russia had bigger fish than Dnipropetrovsk to fry right now. Still, Verbove may have had minor symbolic or propaganda value, a quick win to show on state TV rather than a move of real strategic consequence. And by revealing the falsity of Russia's supposed capture of Verbove, Ukraine has delivered a painful blow to Putin and his Kremlin cronies. There may be signs that Putin's propaganda isn't working as well as it used to. Even those inside Russia's military are getting sick of the Kremlin's lies, even as Russia's soldiers are pushed to perpetrate those lies. Dissent is growing among Russia's generals as the Kremlin refuses to admit its failures. Find out more in our video, and remember to subscribe to the Military Show for more coverage of Ukraine's latest gains and Russia's most egregious lies.